Hey guys, welcome back to Survival Addiction. I wanted to do a video of my medic pack that I carry around with me. So obviously not everyone's going to have this on them, but I kind of just wanted to give you guys an idea of some supplies that would be good to have. Obviously not everyone would know how to use these supplies, and I'll try and clarify that you probably don't want to try some of these supplies unless you know how to use them. Some of them you definitely want some training on. Okay. So this is a Tasmanian tiger medic pack. I believe it's called the Assault Pack MK2. And so I've kind of set it up. So obviously I have a cold pack. So the first pouch is bleeding, second pouch is breathing, and then this is just miscellaneous. So the first thing that you'll see when I open this up is I have an ice pack. Ice packs are good for many reasons. If someone feels like they're going to pass out, it will help cool them down. It's good for inflammation. There's just a couple good things to use. And so this isn't only going to have trauma stuff in it, just to clarify. So for the bleeding pouch, the reason I have them separated is so I can have someone run to my pouch and get the bleeding pouch or the breathing pouch. I can just tell them where it is and they can just grab it for me. So this has quite a few things. So there's conforming stretch gauze, there's tape, triangular bandages, gauze squares, combine pads. So gauze is one of the most important things that you want to have. Any normal person can just use gauze to help stop hemorrhaging, minor bleeding, and just to try and keep a wound as sterile as possible. For the second pouch, breathing, I have a CPR shield. So this is mostly to protect myself. You don't know what people have been in contact with, so it's just good to have something to protect yourself. Same reason I carry gloves. It's not that I don't trust the people. It's mostly just for my protection. So I have OPAs. So it stands for oropharyngeal airway. And there are different sizes, as you can tell. So this one would be more for like a newborn. And this would be for a big male. It really just depends on who it is, like you would want to measure it. This would be an item that you would want training to use. But the good thing about it is it will help keep an airway open. I can't think of any specific scenarios that you would need it, but keeping an airway open is extremely important. You can't get air to someone's lungs if they don't have an airway. And I also carry nasopharyngeal airways. This is a common size that most people, I wouldn't say most people, a lot of people have this size. So what happens is this goes in your nose, and this will help keep your airway open through your nose. So this is for your mouth, this is for your nose. So if none of the mouth one works, then maybe this one will work. And I do have some lubricant in the very back right here, because for, not necessarily for the mouth, but for the nose, it's much easier to insert it if there is lubricant. So for the oropharyngeal, you don't need lubricant. you would use these only on someone who's like unconscious, who wouldn't have a gag reflex. You don't want to use it on people that do have a gag reflex. There are weird people out there. I guess I wouldn't call it weird. There are people out there that do not have a gag reflex when they're conscious. Actually, one of my instructors didn't have a gag reflex, and he was actually able to demonstrate inserting it into his own mouth. Which is kind of strange. But he didn't have one. Okay. So that is breathing. So bleeding is extremely important. You want to control that. Breathing, you want to make sure they can breathe. Those are two of the most life-threatening things that you can have. So on the side here, I do have a pupil gauge. And this is really good to see if someone who has had a stroke. It's good for a lot of things. Like you can use it to examine the back of their throat to see if it's like red. You can use it to see if someone's had a stroke. You can use it to see if like one of their pupils stays big or stays small. Tweezers, they're just these tweezers right here. They're just throwaway tweezers. You use them once and you throw them away. This can be good if you're just like trying to get a sliver out of someone. So like I said, not everything is going to be super traumatic and crazy. Like there's other reasons that you would want to use these things. Like this gauze right here, I ended up using it on my grandpa. He has a clotting disorder. And so just a normal scratch could hurt him quite a bit. Like he doesn't stop bleeding. So we ended up using the gauze just to kind of help give his body time to clot. So this right here, this is a needle decompression kit. Sorry. So you would use this, I believe it's, shoot, I can't think of the word for it right now. But anyways, what it is you get air in your pleural space and it makes it so you can't breathe. And sometimes it happens on just one side. And so you would actually use this to release that air. So just like what it says, it decompresses. I've actually never had to use this. I have training on how to use it, but I don't think I would feel super comfortable using it unless I like absolutely had to use it. I'd probably prefer leaving that up to the paramedics or doctors, just in my personal opinion. Like if I had to use it, if it was life-threatening, I would use this. But I would not recommend anyone who's not had training using that. There's a lot of things that could go wrong if you use it and you have not had training. That's why I'm so nervous about using it. Okay, so this third pouch, like I said, it's for more of like the miscellaneous smaller items. Not everything in here is for the smaller items. So I do have my gloves. These are mostly for my protection. If someone's bleeding out, I'm not going to be as worried about sterility for them. Like obviously it's a concern, but I'm more worried about getting their bleeding controlled versus thinking about infection at a later date. Infection's not going to matter if they're dead, is the way I see it. Okay, so I have glucose gel. This is important for diabetics. So if they have a low blood sugar emergency and you just got to get their sugar up quickly, you can put this in the side of their cheek and it will help their sugar rise to where they're not super ill. The thing with diabetics is it can go bad quickly. So I always keep a couple of these on me, just in case. You never know. You could be in the mall and a diabetic, passes out. Maybe they have a family member with them and no one has glucose gel on them. It's just nice to have on you. So like I said, there's other minor things, bandages, alcohol pads, burn gel, iodine, instruction. I also have hydrocortisone cream, NSAIDs, diphenhydramine. So, like I said, there are a couple important things in here. Gloves for me, glucose gel for other people. The diphenhydramine, that's really important for people that have like an allergic reaction. If you can give them that early enough, it's possible they may not go into anaphylaxis. Obviously, if it's a bad enough allergic reaction, then they're going to need epinephrine. But you cannot get epinephrine without a prescription, so I cannot carry that around on me. I would have to depend on the person having their epinephrine on them. Okay, so the next portion is just some other important things. So this right here is an Israeli bandage. So this is really good when you need a pressure dressing, because there's parts on your body that a tourniquet's just not gonna work. Like, for example, you're bleeding and it's on your hip. You can't really put a tourniquet on your hip. Or you're bleeding out of your chest. You can't really put a tourniquet on your chest. Or you're bleeding out of your neck. Again, you cannot put a tourniquet on your neck. That's kind of a stupid idea. But for those things, you could probably use gauze or a pressure dressing. I honestly wouldn't even know if I would really use a pressure dressing on your neck. Like, that's kind of just a weird zone, because you want to maintain the airway. That's extremely important. And I feel like there's other things that you could do to try and stem the bleeding on a neck. But I'm just trying to give examples of weird situations where you wouldn't be able to use a tourniquet. Because there are parts of your body that a tourniquet just would not work. Okay. Sorry, let me just put this back real quick. Okay. So this right here is probably one of the most important things in this pack. Let me just pull it out real quick. Okay. So these are chest seals. So, like I said, you can't really put a tourniquet on your chest. But if you get shot in your chest, it can make it so you can't breathe. It can mess with all of the anatomy. Can't think of the words at the moment. So you would put one of these on the side of the entry wound and one of them on the side of the exit wound, and it would help it so the person would be able to breathe again. Can't think of the word for it. I'm sure I could do a video explaining more of the details. Anyways, that's the simple answer for it. This is extremely important, and it's not necessarily even with like getting shot. I mean, the likelihood that you're going to get shot is probably pretty low, but there are a lot of other things that could happen. You get in a car accident and, all sorts of weird things can happen. Like, what happens if your windshield blows up or something? Like, you were next to like a gas tanker, like a huge gas tanker, your windshield blows up, piece of glass goes through your chest. this could save your life. So I just carry it around with me. Like, I don't know if I'd ever even need to use it, but it's good to have. Sorry, my examples aren't very good. It's not very often that you would have to use that for a civilian. Okay. So this is just a Mylar blanket. It has like a fancy survival rescue blanket name. But this is actually pretty important. When someone goes into shock, they can lose a lot of body heat and they start to shunt, which means all of their blood and important things, they all go to their vital organs, like the most important parts of their body. And so this will help them retain the heat. So yeah, extremely important. Trauma shears, important for like if you need to cut clothes off, because you may not have time to try and save someone's clothes. It's sometimes easier just to cut through someone's shirt and put the chest seal on them. So good to have. And then of course a tourniquet. So this is a Cat 7 tourniquet. I got this from Medical Gear Outfitters, who gets it directly from North American Rescue. So this is a good tourniquet. There are a lot of fake tourniquets out there, so I would caution you about getting like a tourniquet from Amazon. You don't want to be cheap if you get a tourniquet like this. You want to actually get a tourniquet that's going to work. Because when it comes down to it, if let's say you get in a biking accident and somehow the handlebar when you flew over cut open your leg and now you have arterial bleeding, this tourniquet could possibly save your life. Or let's say you're in a mall and there's a gunman. Someone gets shot and you just happen to have two tourniquets. So you have one for yourself and one for the person who got shot. You can use it to save their life. I would recommend not using this unless you absolutely had to. There are ways to stem bleeding without using a tourniquet. And if you do it wrong with a tourniquet and if it's on too long, it is possible that they might lose function in that limb or might need it amputated. Gauze is usually a better option for like venous bleeding. I would only use this if there's like arterial bleeding. It's kind of a dumb idea to use it for slow venous bleeding or yeah. Anyways, I saw this video on YouTube and it was some rioter or whatever. They got shot with like a rubber bullet. So like they got a little scrape and they were barely bleeding. And you see this guy like took his belt off and he was trying to make a makeshift tourniquet. And belts have been proven not to be very good tourniquets. You just can't get them tight enough because an actual tourniquet, you are tightening their arm so much it's gonna hurt. Because you're stopping the majority of the bleeding. Like you're still gonna want a pulse, but it would be stopping the majority of the bleeding. And that's why it can be so bad. Because if that portion of the body doesn't get enough blood, then it will start to die. And that's why I recommend, if you know how to stop bleeding with like gauze and stuff, try that first. Tourniquets can be bad if you don't know what you're doing. But at the same time, if you see someone arterial bleeding and you don't know how to use gauze, just put the tourniquet on. I mean, the medics will figure it out when they get there. And they're usually pretty good about taking it off on time and getting that person into surgery if they need surgery. Okay, so the very last thing in the pack is pretty important. So it's quick clot, and what this does is, like I said, if someone is arterial bleeding, let's say they're bleeding in their hip, you don't have any pressure dressings or anything, this is really good because you can pack it with this gauze. You can stick your fingers in with the gauze and you can try and find the artery. And once you find the artery, you can press it against the artery and you just keep putting it in that wound until it stops bleeding. They've actually done a couple studies that quick clot is pretty effective, but gauze is actually pretty effective also, just by itself. So this is a hemostatic dressing. So it has like special stuff in it that helps your body create clots quicker. So I always have some of this on me just because it does help them clot quicker. But like I said, gauze is also very effective. And like I said, you just open the pack of gauze, you reach your fingers in, find where the bleeding is coming from, push it in, and just keep packing it. And it's just like it says, you wound pack. So it's gonna hurt them a lot. They're probably gonna like hate you if they're awake. If they're not awake, then you probably aren't gonna feel as bad. But they could possibly be screaming at you the whole time because it is not gonna be super fun. But it's better to be alive than dead, is the way I see it. So yeah, anyways, this is my medic pack. Hopefully this gave you some ideas of some items that are good to have. Like a chest seal, I feel like anyone can use that. There's really no harm to using it, I guess. And having gauze, there's no harm to that. Glucose gel, possibly harm to it, but if someone can verify that that person is diabetic and their blood sugar is low, then you might just save someone's life. Tourniquets, they can be harmful if used improperly. But like I said, if there's blood just squirting out of that person, just put that tourniquet on. Obviously, use your common sense. You don't use a tourniquet on a neck. Ironically, I have seen a YouTube video of someone trying to do that, and that was really stupid. All you have to do is just stop and think for 2 seconds and think, oh yeah, that will probably kill that person if I do that. There's no point in stopping bleeding if that person's not breathing. If they're not breathing, then they're gonna die. And I should clarify, there's no point in stopping bleeding if they're not breathing if you were the cause of that, of them not breathing. If you have a tourniquet on them, there's no way they're gonna start breathing on their own just because of how you use tourniquets. Tourniquets basically go down to the bone, almost. It's that tight. They're extremely painful, but like I said, it's better to be alive and in pain for a short time than be dead. That's just the way I see it. And then the final thing is I have a Cold Steel Tough Light knife. And this is just so I can open packages easily. The good thing is the packages I have, for the most part, they're all easy tear open packages. Like the Quick Clot, that's an easy tear open. But sometimes when you are just in a rush, when you're stressed out, not everything works out perfectly. So it's nice to just have a knife just on you, just in case. I do have a seatbelt cutter that I carry around with me because I wouldn't recommend trying to cut someone out of a seatbelt with a knife unless like you had no other options, just because it could go badly. Anyways, that's my very dumbed down version of my medic pack. Hopefully it gives you some ideas. If I had to give you any advice of things that you want, very least, I would say a tourniquet. It doesn't have to be a Cat 7 tourniquet. There's other tourniquets out there that are okay, like the SWAT T tourniquet. I do carry that around with me. So a tourniquet, gauze, and probably a Mylar blanket, at the very least. I'd recommend that everyone at least carry a tourniquet on them. If you're not going to carry anything else, a tourniquet could save your life or could save someone else's life. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys so much for joining me, and if you liked this video, please like and subscribe. Thanks so much. Okay, bye.